Hello, viewers. Welcome to Divine Revelation. My name is David, and I share powerful stories of people who have seen the other side, people who have died, entered a coma, or had near-death experiences. If you enjoy these videos, please consider giving us a thumbs up and subscribing to our channel. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you won't miss our new videos. Your support helps us grow, and we truly appreciate it.
For over 40 years, I served as a priest in the Diocese of Rochester. My name is Father Thomas Brennan, and I spent most of my ministry at St. Joseph's Parish on 108 Maplewood Avenue in Rochester, New York. I was born in 1952 to Irish immigrant parents who instilled in me a deep reverence for our Catholic faith. By the time I was 12, I knew I wanted to enter the priesthood. I was ordained in 1978, just as Pope John Paul II began his papacy. Throughout my years of service, I found joy in the daily rituals, in hearing confessions, in bringing comfort to the sick and dying. Yet despite my devotion, questions occasionally troubled me, wonderings I kept to myself about certain teachings that seemed at odds with the simplicity of Christ's message. It was on a cold February evening in 2023 when everything changed. I had been visiting a parishioner in the hospital and was driving back to the rectory. The roads were icy, visibility poor as snow swirled in the headlights. I remember checking the time, 9:17 p.m., before my tires lost their grip on Black Creek Bridge. The car spun, then crashed through the guardrail. I felt a moment of weightlessness before the impact with the frozen creek below. The cold water rushed in so quickly. I struggled with my seatbelt as the car began to sink, but my fingers were already numb, unresponsive. This is how it ends, I thought as water rose past my chest. A strange calm came over me as the frigid water reached my chin. My final conscious thought was a simple prayer: Lord, receive my soul. Then darkness, followed by light. The light was unlike anything earthly, warm, embracing and alive. I felt myself moving through a kind of tunnel, drawn forward by an irresistible love. And there, waiting for me in that radiance, stood a figure I recognized immediately, Pope John Paul II. He looked as he had in his prime, strong, vibrant, with those kind, penetrating eyes that seemed to see straight through to your soul. He smiled, and I felt tears of joy streaming down my face. The familiar stooped posture I remembered from his final years was gone, replaced by the straight-backed vigor of his younger days. His skin glowed with an otherworldly health, and his hands, once trembling with Parkinson's, were now steady and strong. "Thomas," he said, his voice resonating with a clarity I had never heard in life, "your time has not yet come. You must return. But first, there are truths you must understand." I couldn't speak. My throat tightened with emotion as I beheld him, Pope John Paul II, the man I had devoted my priesthood to serving. The mountain air around us was crisp and sweet, unlike anything I had breathed before. I realized I felt no pain. The crushing chest pressure that had felled me in the cathedral was completely gone. He gestured, and suddenly we were walking through what seemed like a garden of unearthly beauty. Colors more vivid than any I had ever seen, flowers that seemed to sing with light. The path beneath our feet was lined with stones that sparkled like diamonds, yet were soft to walk upon. Overhead, the sky shifted between shades of blue I had no names for. "I don't understand," I whispered, my voice finding itself at last. Have I died?" "You hover between worlds," he explained, plucking what appeared to be a rose, though its petals shifted color with each subtle movement. "Your body lies in an ambulance racing toward the hospital. Your heart has stopped, but will soon beat again." A butterfly with wings like stained glass windows alighted briefly on his shoulder before floating away. In the distance, I could hear what sounded like a choir, though no singers were visible. "Thomas," he said gently, "many teachings have become distorted over the centuries, not through malice but through human misunderstanding." We passed beneath an archway formed by intertwining trees, their leaves shimmering with an internal light. I recognized faces in the patterns of their bark, loved ones long gone, parishioners I had buried, my mother's gentle smile. He stopped and faced me directly. "The first truth you must understand: God does not answer prayers through Mary." I felt a jolt of surprise. But Holy Father, the intercession of the Blessed Virgin. He raised his hand. Mary is blessed among women, beloved of God, and worthy of our deepest respect. But she would be the first to redirect all worship and prayer to her Son alone. The practice of praying to Mary has created a barrier between many souls and their direct relationship with God. Christ is the one mediator between God and humanity. This teaching must be corrected. My mind raced through decades of Marian devotions I had led, the rosaries, the novenas, the statues I had blessed. Could I have been misleading my flock all these years? As if sensing my distress, he led me to a stream that flowed with water so clear it seemed almost invisible except for the golden light that danced upon its surface. He cupped his hands and drank, motioning for me to do the same. When the water touched my lips, memories flooded through me, the simple faith of my childhood before theological complexities had taken root. Remember how you prayed as a child, Thomas? Direct, honest conversations with God Himself. That simplicity is what Christ desires. We continued walking, and I noticed we were approaching a vast, open space filled with light. Along the way, we passed through what appeared to be a small village. I saw people of all ages engaged in various activities, reading beneath trees with silver leaves, painting with colors that moved like living things, building structures that defied earthly physics. They nodded respectfully to my companion but seemed neither surprised nor awed by his presence. "Are they angels?" I whispered. He laughed, that familiar warm laugh I remembered from audiences at the Vatican. "No, Thomas. They are souls who have gone before. Notice how none wear the trappings of earthly status or denomination. Here, such distinctions fall away." I observed more closely and realized he was right. Nothing identified these souls as Catholic or Protestant, clergy or laity. They simply existed in a state of evident joy and purpose. "The second truth," he continued, "concerns purgatory. This concept had been central to my understanding of the afterlife, a cornerstone of Catholic teaching. I had spent countless hours counseling grieving families, assuring them their loved ones would eventually reach heaven after being purified in purgatory. "Thomas, there is no intermediate state where souls are purified through suffering. This teaching has caused needless anxiety and distorted the gospel of grace. When believers die, they are immediately in the presence of the Lord. The blood of Christ is sufficient." He gestured toward the light-filled expanse before us. So many souls have carried the burden of fear, thinking they must first suffer in purgatory before entering heaven. This is not God's design. As we walked, I remembered Maria Ginelli, a faithful parishioner who had spent her final years obsessively arranging and paying for masses to be said for her late husband, terrified he was suffering in purgatory because of his occasional missed Sunday obligations. Her gaunt face and anxious eyes haunted me now. "But the Council of Trent, the Catechism, centuries of teaching?" I stammered. "Human frameworks attempting to explain divine mysteries," he replied. "Look there." He pointed to a grove of trees where children played. Among them was a young boy I recognized with a shock, Timothy Walsh, a 10-year-old from my parish who had died after a brief battle with leukemia. His parents had been tormented by worry over whether his hasty final confession had been adequate to spare him purgatory's fires. Yet here he was, radiant with health and joy, no trace of suffering or purification visible in his countenance. We paused beside what appeared to be a reflecting pool. In its surface, I could see scenes from my own ministry, moments of comfort I had provided, but also times when I had burdened people with doctrines that now seemed questionable. I saw Mrs. Abernathy leaving my office in tears after I had insisted her non-Catholic husband would need prayers and indulgences to shorten his time in purgatory. I saw the young couple who had left the church after I emphasized the penalties awaiting those who used birth control. "There is one more thing," Pope John Paul II said softly. "The confession box has become, for many, a place of shame rather than healing. The requirement of confessing to a priest has created a system where power is sometimes misused, and where many feel perpetually inadequate before God." The reflecting pool showed more images, a teenage girl, eyes downcast with shame as she mumbled her confessions to me, An elderly man returning week after week with the same struggles, his shoulders increasingly stooped with the weight of perceived failure. He placed his hand on my shoulder. Direct confession to God, with a contrite heart, is what truly matters. Priests should be facilitators of healing, not gatekeepers of forgiveness. I remembered the heavy wooden confessional in St. Mary's where I had spent thousands of hours, the worn kneeler, the screen that separated me from penitence, the practiced words of absolution that sometimes became rote through repetition. But Holy Father, the power to bind and loose given to the apostles, was given so they might free people from burdens, not add to them, he interrupted gently. The early church practiced confession differently. Over time, like many practices, it evolved in ways that sometimes obscured its original purpose. We had reached the edge of a vast meadow filled with flowers that seemed to pulse with their own internal music. In the distance, mountains of impossible heights reached toward the sky, their peaks enveloped in golden clouds. I was overwhelmed. Holy Father, these truths, they contradict so much of what I've taught for 40 years. Truth often does, he replied with gentle humor. Remember, Thomas, Christ came to simplify, not complicate, to liberate, not to burden. I sank down onto a stone bench that seemed to have appeared specifically for this moment. My mind was racing through implications, sermons I would need to recant, practices I would need to reform, a lifetime of theological certainties suddenly cast into question. What will my bishop say? The Vatican? How can I? He sat beside me, and I noticed that his papal ring was gone, replaced by a simple band of light around his finger. Courage has always been your strength, Thomas. Even as a young priest, you stood firm for what you believed right. Now you must stand firm for truth, even when it challenges tradition. A warm breeze carrying the scent of cinnamon and citrus passed over us. In the distance, I could hear what sounded like bells, though unlike any church bells I had ever known. Must I return? I asked suddenly, surprising myself with the question. This place, despite its challenges to my theology, felt more like home than any earthly dwelling ever had. His eyes, those famous eyes that had gazed upon millions during his papacy, looked at me with infinite compassion. Your work is not finished, Thomas. There are souls who need what you will now understand. He reached into the folds of his garment, not papal robes, I realized now, but a simple white tunic, and withdrew what appeared to be an ordinary river stone. When he placed it in my palm, it was warm and seemed to pulse with a gentle heartbeat. Keep this, he said. When doubts come, and they will, hold it and remember this conversation. The stone grew warmer in my hand, and suddenly I felt a strange pulling sensation. The garden, the Pope, the impossible beauty around me began to fade. Wait! I cried out. There's so much more I need to ask. His voice came to me as if from a growing distance. Truth is a journey, Thomas. This is just the beginning. The colors around me began to blur and run like watercolors in the rain. The last thing I saw was his benediction, not the formal gesture of the papacy, but a simple, loving motion of farewell. Suddenly, I felt a pulling sensation. The garden, the light, and Pope John Paul II began to fade. Your time to return has come, he said. Share what you have learned, with gentleness and wisdom. The next thing I knew, I was coughing up water, a paramedic leaning over me. They told me later that a motorist had seen my car go over the bridge and called emergency services immediately. I had been clinically dead for nearly 4 minutes. The doctors called it a miracle that I survived without brain damage. But the true miracle was what I had seen and what I now understood. I returned to my ministry with new purpose, sharing these truths carefully with those who are ready to hear them. Not all are. Change comes slowly in the church. But I know what I experienced, and I can no longer teach what I now understand to be in error. Some nights, I wake suddenly, the memory of that light so vivid it seems to fill my bedroom. In those moments, I feel a profound certainty that what I witnessed was real, more real, perhaps, than anything in this temporal world.